The Magical Voice Man. One of the amazing things about Paul Winchell was that he never moved his lips. He was a great ventriloquist, and when he worked with his silent partner Jerry Mahoney, Paul's lips never moved. Edgar Bergen, who came to fame on radio where it didn't matter, moved his lips as Charlie McCarthy, Mortimer Schnurd, and Effie Clinker. Not Paul. He was not known as an inventor, but he actually invented a practical artificial heart. He was not well known as a painter, but he painted meticulously. And he was not known as an actor, although what else could you call what he did with his family of dummies? But he wanted to be. I met him when he came to interview for a very good role on the Virginian TV series, which I was producing in the late 60s. During 5 years, I produced more than 50 90-minute episodes. I remember driving Paul out to the back lot to meet the director, when there was a lull in our conversation. He held his wristwatch to his ear, and I suddenly heard a sports program being broadcast, complete with crowd noise, then a soap opera, then the news, all filtered as if coming from a radio, and Paul never moved his lips. He played a reclusive prospector on the show, and he was very good. Doug McClure was one of the series stars, and he and Paul became friendly. One day the company was on a hill, some distance from the studio proper. Doug was not there, but several other actors were. The director, Abner Billerman, called them to rehearse, and Paul started over with one of the others. "Not you," I said, "the actors." Abner said as a joke. There was nervous laughter, but Paul obviously didn't think it was funny. Next day found us in the same circumstances. Abner rehearsed the actors, called for a take. Halfway through, we heard Doug's voice calling from a great distance. "Abner! Abner!" Abner was annoyed. He said, "Cut!" ignored Doug and demanded another take. Again, Doug's faint voice calling insistently, and again, "Cut!" and then once more. But Doug would not go away. Abner took another break, strode to the edge of the hill, livid with frustration. He cupped his hands to his mouth and yelled as loud as he could, "Doug, for Christ's sakes, I'm trying to shoot here." The cast and crew burst out laughing, because by then, everyone except Abner had realized that Paul, standing nearby, was throwing his voice, not only far away, but as Doug McClure. Paul was one of the actors from then on. We went out to dinner with Paul and Nina one night, and outside the restaurant, we bumped into a friend. The actor Don Redberry, and with his wife, who was very pregnant. During the conversation, a tiny voice came from the general direction of her stomach. "I'll bet I'm a boy." Paul could stop traffic that way. He came to a picnic at our house one Sunday afternoon, and everyone brought their kids. One little boy, Robert Allen Cohen, didn't know about Paul. And when Paul threw his voice under the house, sounding like a child crying for help, R.A. ran to his mother, sobbing. Later, when Paul demonstrated, showing that it was him all along, Robert Allen was fascinated, urging Paul for more. And Paul himself was fascinating. Funny, literate, a wonderful storyteller. He had stuttered as a child, and was about 14 when he began working in burlesque. He was precocious, even then, trying to date the strippers. The stuttering got in his way. Paul soon realized that he was much better off using the dummy's voice. The dummy never stuttered. One of the best things about Paul was his wife Nina. She was beautiful, delightful, and a great cook. Her Italian dinners were a coveted invitation, and we met great and famous comedians at her table. Many stand-up tournaments took place in the Winchell's conversation pit for those who could still struggle to their feet after eating. One night the four of us dined alone at the white porcelain kitchen table. It was empty, but something delectable on the stove in a huge pot. Without warning, Nina picked it up and dumped it unceremoniously into the virginal surface. Mounds of spaghetti and meatballs. She handed each of us a napkin and forks and said, "Dig in." It was a Sicilian tradition, she said, for special occasions, special friends. A spaghetti out. Between mouthfuls, Paul and I discussed opening chains of spaghetti outs everywhere, and began planning menus and how we'd plow our earnings back into the business. Regrettably, that never happened. Paul and Nina divorced sometime later, and we drifted apart. But I think of those days often. I miss the Winchells, and I wonder who got the portrait of a voluptuously nude Nina. which used to hang over their king-size bed. Somewhere, I hope, Paul is throwing his voice far, far away and not moving his lips.